It all started on a Wednesday afternoon in the small town of Rochester, New York. The sun was shining, the birds were chirping, and life was pleasantly boring for 14-year-old Tommy Jenkins. He had just finished his math homework when his mom called him down to the living room. "Tommy, your grandpa's moving in with us for a bit," she said, her voice a mix of excitement and slight panic. He's getting a little older and we thought it'd be nice for him to stay here." Tommy groaned inwardly. He loved Grandpa, sure, but the old man was weird. Not in a bad way, just, well, eccentric. He had wild stories about everything from the alien encounter of '78 to the time he tried to wrestle a kangaroo in Australia. Tommy figured half of them were exaggerated or just flat out made up. Grandpa arrived later that afternoon, rolling into the driveway in a bright orange Volkswagen Beetle that seemed held together by pure willpower. He stepped out wearing a Hawaiian shirt, cargo shorts, and a pair of neon green Crocs. It was the most chaotic outfit Tommy had ever seen, and it screamed, "I don't care what anyone thinks." "Tommy boy," Grandpa exclaimed, giving him a bear hug. "Ready to have some fun?" Tommy wasn't exactly sure how to respond. Yeah, sure, Grandpa. What kind of fun?" Grandpa leaned in conspiratorially. "Oh, you'll see. You'll see." Then he winked. Later that evening, as the family gathered around the dinner table, Grandpa began sharing stories. Tommy's mom, dad, and younger sister Molly laughed politely, but Tommy noticed something odd. Grandpa kept dropping strange hints, things that didn't quite add up. "And then," Grandpa said, pointing a finger in the air for dramatic effect, "I outran a speeding car. No joke." Tommy snorted into his mashed potatoes. "Sure, Grandpa. You ran faster than a car." "Oh, I didn't say run," Grandpa said with a grin. "I flew." Everyone laughed, but Tommy saw a glimmer in Grandpa's eye. Was he serious? A few days later, Tommy was still trying to shake the ridiculous idea that Grandpa had actual superpowers. But things started to get strange around the house. It began with the toaster. One morning, Tommy's dad was fumbling with it, trying to fix whatever had caused it to spew smoke every time someone wanted toast. "Dad, let me help," Tommy offered, watching his father struggle. Before either of them could reach for the pliers, Grandpa swooped in from the hallway. "Allow me," he said with a flourish. Tommy's dad rolled his eyes. "Dad, this is a job for—" But before he could finish, Grandpa simply tapped the toaster with his pinky finger. Suddenly, the toaster beeped, dinged, and popped out 2 perfectly golden slices of toast. Tommy's jaw dropped. "Whoa, how did you—" "Trade secret." Grandpa winked again, and then he wandered off to watch his favorite show, Extreme Knitting Championships. Over the next few days, more strange incidents happened. The clogged sink, fixed instantly when Grandpa walked by. Tommy's math homework, magically correct after Grandpa casually glanced at it. Molly's lost hamster appeared in its cage even though the whole family had searched for hours. Tommy was beginning to suspect something big. Then came the day everything became clear. Tommy was in the backyard practicing skateboard tricks. He was attempting a simple ollie when he slipped, lost his balance and flew backward, landing hard on the ground. He groaned in pain, holding his ankle. Suddenly, Grandpa was there. Where he came from, Tommy had no idea. "Need a hand, kid?" Grandpa asked, crouching down. "Grandpa, I think I twisted my ankle." Tommy winced. Grandpa looked around, making sure no one else was watching. Then, with a serious expression, he leaned in close. "Tommy, I need to tell you something. It's time." "Time for what?" Grandpa stood up, took a deep breath, and raised his hands dramatically to the sky. "I have a superpower." Tommy squinted. "You mean like you're invincible or something?" Grandpa shook his head. "Nope. Better. My superpower is convenience." Tommy blinked. "What?" Grandpa looked around to make sure they were alone. "I have the power to make things convenient, you know, things that would normally be annoying, difficult, or downright impossible. I can fix them, make them easy. No fuss, no struggle." Tommy sat up, confused. "Like making toast?" Grandpa nodded enthusiastically. Exactly. I can fix anything, find anything, make anything work. I don't need to run faster than a car, Tommy boy. I just make the car break down before it reaches me. Tommy burst out laughing. Grandpa, that's the weirdest superpower I've ever heard of. Grandpa grinned. It's not flashy, I'll give you that, but it's useful. Think about it. Who wouldn't want life to be a little more convenient? Tommy wasn't sure whether to believe Grandpa or chalk it up to more of his tall tales, but soon Grandpa's power would be put to the test. One Saturday afternoon, the Jenkins family headed out to the local carnival. The town was abuzz with excitement, and there were rides, games, and food stalls as far as the eye could see. Tommy, Grandpa, and Molly were in line for the Ferris wheel when suddenly a loudspeaker blared. Attention! Attention! The Ferris wheel is malfunctioning. Please clear the area. People groaned in disappointment. Tommy and Molly exchanged glances and Grandpa chuckled softly. Watch this, Grandpa whispered. Before anyone could react, Grandpa casually strolled up to the Ferris wheel operator. Say, mind if I take a look at that? The operator looked confused but waved him over. Grandpa tapped the control panel with his finger and immediately the entire Ferris wheel powered up, the lights flashing brightly, the gears humming smoothly. The crowd gasped. It's fixed! Someone shouted. He fixed it! Molly's eyes were wide. Grandpa, how did you… Shh, Grandpa said with a wink. It's a trade secret, remember? Grandpa whispered, flashing his signature wink as he strolled back to where Tommy and Molly stood, both of their jaws hanging open. Tommy shook his head, a grin slowly forming. You really do have a superpower, don't you? Grandpa smiled, nodding slightly. It's not much, but it gets the job done. As the Ferris wheel started up again, people cheered and clapped, oblivious to what had just happened. Tommy was starting to think that maybe, just maybe, Grandpa's ridiculous stories weren't so ridiculous after all. The day continued, with Grandpa's convenience powers quietly at work behind the scenes. Long lines at the cotton candy stand. Grandpa nudged Tommy and said, "Why don't you check the other side?" And sure enough, they found a stall with no line at all. The bumper cars ran out of tickets right before it was their turn, but Grandpa managed to convince the operator to give them a few extra rides. And when the rain threatened to pour down just as the family was about to leave, Grandpa simply glanced at the sky with a raised eyebrow, and the clouds parted. By the time they returned home that evening, Tommy was convinced Grandpa really was a superhero. Maybe he couldn't shoot lasers from his eyes or lift cars over his head, but in his own quirky, practical way, he made life easier for everyone around him. As Tommy lay in bed that night, thinking about all that had happened, he realized something important. It wasn't the power itself that made Grandpa special. It was the way he used it, not to show off, but to make life smoother for everyone around him. That, Tommy thought, was the real superpower. The next morning, as Tommy sat down at the breakfast table, Grandpa was already there, sipping his coffee and reading the newspaper. Without looking up, he slid a perfectly toasted bagel toward Tommy. "Good morning, Tommy boy," Grandpa said with a grin. Tommy smiled, taking a bite of the bagel. "Good morning, Grandpa. You know, I've been thinking…" "Oh," Grandpa lowered his paper, intrigued. "About what?" Tommy leaned back in his chair, looking thoughtful. "Your power. It's not just convenience, is it?" Grandpa raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "It's more than that," Tommy said slowly. "It's like you make life better for people. You make things easier, but it's not just for you. It's for everyone around you. That's what makes it special." Grandpa beamed. "Well, kiddo, I never thought of it that way. But maybe you're right." Tommy grinned. "Maybe that's the best kind of superpower." Grandpa chuckled, reaching over to ruffle Tommy's hair. "You're a smart one, Tommy boy. You're going to go far." As Tommy finished his breakfast, he glanced at Grandpa, who was humming softly to himself. Maybe superpowers didn't always come with capes and flashy costumes. Maybe sometimes the greatest power of all was just making life a little easier for the people you loved. And with that thought, Tommy realized that he was okay with Grandpa moving in after all. Because having a secret superhero in the house? That was pretty cool. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring and heartfelt content. Stay tuned for more stories that uplift and inspire. Your support helps us continue sharing these meaningful stories. Thank you, and we'll see you in the next story.